This is the build video for the QRPme Acorn Tube 2 power supply. This is part of a larger kit for 4 days in May Buildathon. My name is Stephen Hauser, N1SH. Let's take a look at the tools that you're going to need here for this build. Here's the completed board here, so I've already jumped forward in time. But we've got a basic multimeter. This one is an auto-ranging multimeter, so this will let me, at the end, to test my outputs from this board. I'm going to need a soldering iron to solder the components together. I've got a pair of tweezers because my fingers are not as nimble as they used to be. A pair of wire snips so that I can cut off the ends of things. And a small flathead screwdriver over here to adjust my power supply, to adjust the DC boost converter, and also to screw in some of these small terminals. And then a regular Phillips head screwdriver to screw the boost converter down to the board, and also the LM317 voltage regulator. So when we get all done with this board, this is going to be what it looks like, so that you'll have a good idea what we're going towards. Oh, I've also got a pair of wire snippers, or wire strippers over here. I've got 2 different types of wire strippers that I use. It kind of depends on what I'm stripping. Doesn't matter. You can also use a really old-fashioned pair of wire strippers like these that I've had for many years. So your choice in terms of how you do these. So go ahead and get your soldering iron heated up and let's get going. I've got a printout of the board layout, and I've got the kit fresh from QRPme. So let's break into the kit and let's check our parts and let's see what we've got. So we open this up and I've got a little box to put this in. Let's pull out the circuit board, and you can see here that the circuit board matches what we've got here. I'm going to lay out my parts on this board here. First off, I'm going to dump them out. Now there's not a lot of parts for this kit, so it should be relatively easy going. But I'm also prone to losing parts as I go, so we'll keep track of them. So I've got a little bit of wire for our DC voltage input, and this will come in at the bottom of the board here at our in 12 volts. And we also might use it for our heater here as well. So I'll put that up here. I've got a little bit of hookup wire for the boost converter. As we go, here's the boost converter itself, fresh off the boat, as Rex likes to say. I've got a couple of resistors here, some low wattage resistors. Our 220 high wattage resistor, which is going to go here. Our LM317, which is going to go here. Our rectifier, which is going to go here. Our 50 ohm 5 watt resistor, which will go here. Whoops, I put that in the way of our 100 microfarad 400 volt, or 1 microfarad, our 0.1 UF capacitor down here. I've got some hardware, and this little bit of hardware will be used for both the heatsink for the LM317 and to hook the boost converter on. So I've got some spacers to hold that off. Now I've got a couple of resistors here. This one in particular is our 0 ohm resistor. I'm not going to be able to get that to focus, but the 0 ohm resistor has a single black wire on it, or a single black line on it. So that's going to go here. This resistor is in place when we're using a DC input for the entire circuit, and we take it out if we're powered from the high voltage. I'm not going to be powered from the high voltage, so I'm going to have this short in, and I'm also not going to have this 3 watt here. Now I've also got 2 other. Here's our high precision resistor. This high precision 970 resistor is R1, so that will go in here. And R2, which is our 240, will go here. So I've got the 220, not a lot of components. Now I'm going to start out building this board, and when I do, I'm going to start with some of the resistors first to get those on, get the low pieces on. Then I'll move along to the capacitors. And then after I get the capacitors, I'll put the rectifier and I'll work on the LM317. So we're going to start off with the resistors first, like I said. So I'm going to take this 220 12 half watt resistor, see where we're going to put it, and I'm going to bend the leads into place. So let's take this, let's bend that lead down. So we're going to go there and just about there. I'm not very accurate with these all the time. So I'm going to put these in, and then I will solder it afterwards. So we get that one. Now again, we've got R1 and R2, and we've got to remember that R1 is the precision resistor. So there we go. Now we've got R2, which will do similar. Take off the little bit of paper. And we'll put R2 in. Okay, now I'm going to flip this over and start soldering. Now these should stay in pretty well. I'm going to bend the leads out a little bit just so they stay in place. Now there's not a lot here, so it makes it relatively easy for this particular board. We've only got a few things that we have to deal with. Now, I took a little break there off camera and I put in the short resistor, the shorting 0 ohm resistor as well. Sorry about the glare, but we've got that right here. That shorts because we're going to be using DC input for this. So from here, let's clean up a little bit. And let's take a look at what's coming next for us. The next thing that's coming for us is we're going to put in our capacitors. So I'm going to take, here's my 0.1 microfarad capacitor. Here we go down in here. I'm going to bend those leads over to hold it in place. Okay, now we've got our smaller, our 1 microfarad, and we've got the plus and minus. And let's make sure we line up the plus and the minus. So here I've got the minus side. Separate the leads a little bit. And let's drop that right in here. And again, I'm going to bend the leads a little bit to hold it in place while I work through this. And we've got our capacitors in, all except for the largest one. So let's work on the rectifier, because that is going to have some hardware associated with it. So let's take out what hardware we've got. Let's put it right here. Again, I lose it all over the place if I'm not careful. So pay attention, we've got the pieces for the boost converter, but then we've got a heat sink here for the LM317. So here's our parts for the boost converter. These longer nuts and standoffs, and then here we've got for our LM317. So we're going to drop that in there, and then this is going to go through the LM317 to keep it bolted down. And then let's flip it over, put the nut on. Make sure our leads are down in there. And let's go ahead and solder. Let's take now and drop in the rectifier. Now the rectifier is polarized, so we want to make sure we get it in the right way. So we've got the plus up towards the top of the board. Just drop that right in there. I'm going to give it a little bit of space here between the board and the bottom of the rectifier, just because I like to do that. Okay, so now the rectifier is in. Now another sort of large component, the 50 ohm resistor. So again, this is for the high voltage. So let's bend that to what we think is the right size. Let's start taking a look at the boost converter here. I've also got to solder on my 12 volt leads and my heater leads here. So let's see, the boost converter is going to go in, and we've got two connecting points on the boost converter here. We've got the input and the output. We want to double check and make sure, so let's look this over. Right here it's labeled in. I don't think you'll be able to see it on camera, but here it's labeled in. So we make sure we link up our in with the in here, and the out here with the out here. And then we'll be able to adjust this boost converter with this potentiometer right here so that we can get the right output that we're looking for. And this is going to go right on here, and then we're going to wire it up with our little bits of hookup wire. So let's start off and let's bolt it into position first, and then we'll worry about the hookup wire, which we'll be able to screw in and solder in. So let's do the same thing here for our output. And this is going to be the higher voltage output. Now we've got the same scheme here. Here's our negative. There we go. Okay, I've got one last component, this large, and we want to make sure the large capacitor, make sure we've got it polarized correctly so that we've got the positive where the positive is supposed to go and the negative where the negative is supposed to go. Let's make it. I'm going to drop our 12 volts in here. I might do this from underneath. I'm going to do it from the top. So this should be our completed board. So we've got everything in place. We've got the short in place here because we're going to be powering from 12 volt DC. So we're going to check our output here at 3 volts, and then we're going to tune for this to be at around 175 volts. So let's go ahead and test. Okay, the first thing we're going to test is the 6.3 volt output here. So I've got my power supply set at 12 volts, with, and I'll put this on the negative and this on the positive so that we can see what we get. And I'll go ahead and hit the output. And let's see, we've got 6.28 volts. So our LM317 is working perfectly as advertised. Now let's check the output. We see our boost converter. The fuse has not blown, so that's a good sign. And we see over here that we've also got this LED which is lit. So that means the boost converter is up and running. So let's check the high voltage side. So I got to be careful on the high voltage side because again, this is high voltage. Now it's not a lot of current, but let's see what we've got. Now I've got it reversed, but well, here, we'll flip it around, make sure we've got it the right way around. So I'll go with the minus and the plus, make sure you don't short these things out. We've got 67 volts. So let's go ahead and tune this and see what we can get. 66, I need to go the other way. Because we want around 175. Between the minus and the plus, we've got 175, pretty close to it. And then on the low voltage side, 6.28, 6.3. So if we take a closer look at the board here, we can see all the different parts of it. And we can see what we're tuning and what we're not tuning. So here again is the potentiometer. Oh, let me try to get that in focus. Here's the potentiometer on the boost converter that we tune to get the voltage that we want. We've got our 0 ohm resistor in place here because we've shorted this. We're using the DC input down in here. If you want to use the AC input from up here, this AC input will only power the high voltage side. So if we do that, we remove this 0 ohm resistor that disconnects the low voltage and the high voltage side from each other. The low voltage side will always still need to come from 12 volt down here. So we've got our LM317, our precision resistor here, our other resistor. Again, if we're also powering with high voltage, we might have this regulator in here. We've got this. Then the boost converter. On the back side, you can see we've got our solder connections. Not as exciting there. But that should give you an idea of everything on the Acorn Tube 2 power supply. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this build video. A little bit of glare on the screen. I apologize for that. It's Stephen Hauser, N1SH.